Hi, welcome to my mentorship series. This is a series of videos, video recordings of my mentorship meetings with Stephen Bauman. This month in October, we're focusing on a few things. First thing was simplification and unity of value shapes and transitional areas, and in particular, value transitions, how to control those, some critiques on my artwork about how I could improve my own transitional areas, and as well as deviations from the reference. So when to adjust or manipulate things that you see in a reference, be it shadows or finding a good crop for the photo. Yeah, so stay tuned. I'm just going to jump right into the meeting now.
The whole sort of values world is it goes without saying, obviously it's a complicated space. I think that the really challenging thing with it is you have more divergent pieces to create harmony in between. Right? Like to create a harmony, it means like all things are kind of working in a corresponding way, right? Like that everybody in the choir is singing the correct tone.
Right.
If a person's off, you hear it, and like it kind of throws off the performance. I think of values like this too. When I first start my value statements, they're a bit patchy, and I need to like kind of step back from the whole thing and figure out what parts of this are like not on tune, you know? Or at least that's how
Mhm.
I kind of think about my process. Do you find like when you're working, do you find like your initial lay-in of values is like that, that you feel it's the more broken up and then you're traveling towards more unity or no?
Certainly, I do feel it is mostly broken up.
Mm.
And I was actually excited when I saw your boot camp for October because
Hmm.
I think it's like a value focused one, right? Where you go dark right away.
Just as black as you can, as fast as you can, and then just see how to find your way out of that. I always think of it as like they say, like if you get dropped in the middle of the jungle, you'll find your way out. Like that's what I think of it as. Drop yourself in the middle of a drawing situation, find yourself out of it, or find your way out of it.
Okay. It sounds like
Yeah.
you're not easing yourself into the problem. You're kind of jumping right into it.
Yeah.
And that sounds probably a good thing because that's definitely not what I do. I kind of ease myself
Mm.
into it, and that's where I found myself these past months. I guess maybe the past years of my life. I usually just ease into it. So getting more time trying to find my way out of the jungle might be the thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a valuable thing in that it's like there's no good reason for you to do it this way, if that makes sense. Like the only reason to do it this
Uh-huh.
way is to find out what happens if dot dot dot. So it's
Hmm.
putting yourself in a situation you would never find yourself in because probably it's not the most practical way. However, it does contain in it solutions that you can't find any other way. Like that was the valuable thing for me and like all the experimentation I did is that there are requirements when you do things a certain way that just you'd never come across if you worked another way. And so that leads to a level of versatility that's just it just hits different. As always with the things that you do, I find that like fundamentally, I see the good thinking in it. There are places where then we need to actually just take that quite a bit further and see opportunities in a different way. Principally, there's stuff you could have done in the eye that you just didn't do because you didn't think to do it, but it would have made it much better. You've made like a very itemized assessment of the values in it, and you needed to group them more. So essentially, that means like bigger, simpler shapes. So you looked at this as an eye and thought, okay, I see all the different kind of component parts of the eye, which you can be forgiven for because, of course, kind of we all see that in a way. But what you didn't see is, I think what happens a lot when you kind of paint is that you picture things as though like what would they be if I had a half-inch wide brush to paint them with? Like what would it look like? What would those value groups look like? And that's a really powerful thing because it helps you to massively like simplify the stuff that you're seeing. And when you do that, you get stronger shapes and a better control like over the values that you're using. So I think there's a world where the eye is really broken down into components more like this,
Hmm.
right? Whereas here, to me, the phrase that I use is it's a terrible phrase, but I like it because it just sounds so much like what it is.
Hmm.
This happens all the time when I block in values. Is my first assessment after blocking in values is my drawing looks very bitty. It looks like a lot of different bits that
Hmm.
are in there, and they're not like grouped together. They don't like congeal into the right shapes. And so, like when I look at this, I think, yeah, no, it just seems to me like very bitty. It's a lot of different bits, and it doesn't have maybe necessarily like the kind of combined focus that you want if you were looking at this maybe from a slightly different perspective. That perspective, of course, would be that of sort of value grouping. Now, is it specifically like answering to a rational, like a totally rational impulse? No, not exactly. I can't tell you that this is more of an eye than what you've drawn. I can just say experientially, it will work better than the eye that you've drawn. Like you'll get a clearer value statement out of this. You'll get a clearer sense of form, a clearer sense of like impression by grouping your values a bit more kind of efficiently and your shapes a bit more simply. Like that is like always going to look more like that eye, like it hits, right?
Hmm.
Whereas this, to me, looks very bitty and doesn't necessarily have the same impression as the eye we're looking at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like a value study where you limit yourself to X number of values and you kind of group as best you can.
Hmm. I think that's the functional interaction.
Hmm.
Um, the approach, I would say, is just trying to get like a bigger picture approach. As we do this, as we zoom out from this more and more and more and more, the more that interpretation that I made of the eye will look better and better and better and better. You see what I mean? Whereas I think we do fall into like seeing the eye like this. I mean, hey,
Yeah.
listen, I work in photographs too. Like, I get what it's like. And in fact, oddly enough, I've been working from life a lot over the last month and a half, and getting like closer and closer and closer to the model I'm working with. Like, so like I'm like 2 feet from her face. Like I can see the detail. Like I can see the eyelashes. You still have to like maintain that kind of far off, kind of big picture view if the drawing is going to have that kind of value based kind of impact.
Mhm.
It's the same thing like in the eyebrow. Like the eyebrow is even maybe like a stronger example of this. And I'm all for texture. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't think that eyebrows need to only be shapes, but I think there's an extent to which you can say that they are, if you do give them like a clear shape, they deliver, more on the impression than if you consider them kind of separately. Now, obviously, I'm doing this in like jet black tones because this is digital painting, so forgive me that. But that's just because it's easier to create like a nuance with graphite, I think, than it is for me. I mean, I work quite naturally in graphite, so let's see if we can bring that up in value. Yeah, maybe something in that neighborhood. What I love, all right, there's a few things I want to say that I absolutely adore about this. One of them, and I swear to you, this is not damning with faint praise. This contour is badass. Like the shape design along that is so good. And it's really just a qualitative thing. It's not, I don't think it's more like the photograph than another area, or it's more accurate or something in another area. It's just better drawing. It's better design. Um, like it really, I mean, I was just at all right, wait a minute. You must know Alphonse Mucha.
Oh yes, I have a
Okay.
book.
I was just at an exhibition. There's all these parts of Rome now that I have like the names for, so I'm going to exercise that. But in
Okay.
Piazza Venezia, which is like kind of in the center of town near the Roman Forum, there's Palazzo Bonaparte, which is like yeah, it's the palace that Napoleon lived in when he was in Rome.
Oh.
Um, but they had an Alphonse Mucha exhibition. I thought I would be disappointed because I knew what I was going to get is like mostly prints of his work. And I thought, I'm going to go to a show to see a poster that feels a bit right? Like it
Yeah.
sounds a bit as I describe it. What I wanted, what I hoped for was like, oh, that I'd see a bunch of his drawings, like his actual, the physical drawings themselves. And I saw a few of them, but mostly it was posters. What I didn't account for is that there's so much more detail in the posters themselves than anything really that you see when you look at it online or like on a small. I mean, the posters are like enormous. They're like as tall as me. So they're like the level of design and detail that and nuance that he puts into them, you can get at least a better sense of that looking at them in person. Thank God. Otherwise, I probably would have been a bit bummed out by the exhibition. All this to say, he is head and shoulders above in terms of just the raw making of a silhouette shape, head and shoulders above the other draftsmen of his area of his era. And it's this like kind of raw design quality that he has, which is like a tastefulness thing. It's a thing that's in your hand, and it affects eventually all the things that you do. That that's like I think such an amazing quality, and I see it like along this edge. Eventually, that will hopefully populate all the shapes that you make, but just seeing it happening there, I think, is really worth mentioning. The other things that I quite like is what you've done through here, which is to say, like, maintain a really strong sense of form, like across this axis, and not kind of fallen prey to that, like, I need to make a shadow under all the hair kind of impulse that I know exists. Things that don't work, and I think a couple of them are pretty objectively true. When I look at the kind of value grouping in the neck, what occurs to me, or what I know, is that the neck is going to be like a cylinder inside of a kind of plane, right? So the shoulders and the shoulder girdle like are this kind of separate plane. The neck kind of slots into, right?
Yep.
But the vertical nature of this axis meeting the relatively more horizontal nature of this axis should create a circumstance in which we have or we should find like a significant value change in between the two. What I don't like is the super light value going all the way up the sternocleidomastoid, because that's, I think, you looking at values in relationship to like the edges of shapes, but kind of seeing the whole light shape as this like single directional plane, right? Like not recognizing that the normals would face like different directions.
Hmm.
Um, would you say that's consistent with your thinking, or is it's just a thing? It also could be just a thing that happened that you didn't account for.
It was definitely the the second part, the latter. I didn't really account for it.
Just a thing that happened. Yeah. Okay.
I had the sense at least that I needed to do something different there. I just didn't execute that.
Okay.
But I don't know. I think that might be one of the pitfalls of like looking at a reference and not understanding what I'm looking at.
Right.
Um, like I see that there is a value shift closer
Yeah.
to where um the chin and the neck meet. I can see that
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, where
I
the jaw and the neck meet, you mean?
yes, the
Or
jaw and the
the
neck.
yeah, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, not
Right.
the chin. I guess cutting into the values might not be the right word, but expressing them in a like in a roundish way. I couldn't think of a good way to do that. Of course, I know that I could look at anatomy books to see, okay, where is like what is the shape of the trapezius? Yeah, I think I definitely needed more work there. I think that there's a lot of subtle like bumps and stuff around there, like where the sternocleidomastoid meets the sternum. There's like the bump, and then the clavicle
Yeah.
is just if I squint down, I see so little. There's a lot of unity when I squint down, but
Mm,
maybe if I bump up the contrast, that might work better for me to like make more
mm,
sense of it.
mm.
Um,
I I feel like there's a couple things active in that, and I want to format this thought in such a way that I'm fair to both sides of them. Before I knew a bunch of stuff, I still needed to do the same. I had the same goal. I wanted to make a drawing that was naturalistic, represented the tone well, structure well. I just didn't have a lot of backlog of like information to like necessarily assist me in doing that. There were certain ideas that were really practical and useful at the time. Things like really meditating on shape design and just looking at the organization of shadow and light and how those two meet each other and utilizing that to the best ability that I possibly could, which I would liken to, I don't know, if you're doing construction, you're tearing down a wall, instead of using a sledgehammer, you're using a hammer and chisel. It's way slower and harder. It kind of does actually the same thing. Like that wall will come down, but
Mhm.
you're going to be there like a long time, like in these tiny increments. Whereas then, like later on, when I had accumulated a lot of knowledge, by that I don't just mean theory, but like applying anatomy to drawing and applying structure to drawing. I then had that sledgehammer. There were different ideas that I used that became much more efficient. Now, I don't know that necessarily all the information that I use now vis-a-vis anatomy structure, if I just handed that over to the guy using the shadow shape, light shape, hammer and chisel approach, that immediately would have resulted in something really better, if that makes sense. So rather than like invalidating the earlier one in favor of the later one, I think I would just say utilizing the one that you have now for everything that it's worth is great as you begin to add and address that backlog of information needed for anatomy and structure to become a more powerful tool. I think so often what I did in my career that was a misunderstanding is that I would invalidate a previous process or knowledge base in favor of the new one that I was chasing. So I would say, oh, it's not about shape design. It's not about like just seeing shadow and light well. It's about anatomy and structure. Okay, yeah. Well, I'm being unnecessarily decisive. I'm closing one door that I don't need to close.
Mhm.
Yes, the one is good and carried me up into this point and will necessarily affect in a positive way the things I do after. But adding to it also is like incredibly important because it's not a complete, it's a hammer and chisel. I need a sledgehammer to take down the wall kind of thing. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the process of learning how to draw isn't about discarding a tool in favor of a new one, but utilizing all of it
Hmm.
when appropriate and polishing
Mm.
all of your tools.
Hmm. And also not looking at the problem that you're in today and thinking you need an extra thing to solve it.
Mm.
Like the anatomy stuff, like knowing what the bumps are is good, but not knowing what the bumps are is not invalid.
Ah,
Um, I always think of an instructor that I worked with. He's an artist and a friend, Jordan Sokol, who I remember hearing him say something that I just so fundamentally disagreed with, despite again, he's a good friend. But like intellectually, there's this massive differences. But he used to talk about things like, because he didn't learn anatomy very much. I mean, obviously, he's worked in this field for like 20 years, so you can't escape without some anatomy in
mhm.
you. But like, I mean, I studied and taught crochet for several years, and but so without that, he would recommend to students in talking about shape design. You really like he would say this, and it almost hurts me to say it, but it's actually on some level it's so right. It's so right. But I don't know that the student could really possibly understand this. But he would say like you need to like empathize with a shape. You need to like feel everything that you can about the shape that you're designing. Now there's a genre of teaching in drawing that's like if you are as esoteric as possible, you can rely on a student to derive wisdom from a seemingly opaque advice. Do you know
Oh
what I mean?
no.
Like, Like if you really meditate
Okay.
on that, what does it mean to empathize? Like if you really meditate on any advice, you're gonna, you know what I mean? Like if you're a clever person, you're gonna derive some value in it. And I almost
Mm,
think of that advice like that. It's like it's so far out there that you could read anything into it. It could be the best advice ever, or it could be total nonsense. It's up to the student. The thinking it's a good advice thing is to say that it might be slower, but without an anatomical roadmap, it's not impossible to see very well the thing you're drawing. In fact, some people would say to like see things really clearly, it's a valid experience to see it with sort of innocent eyes, with cleansed doors of perception where you don't have a name for the thing. You need to allow your intuition to help you describe it in the best way possible. Obviously, that's super inefficient, but not invalid in that.
hmm
So where you are today, see the shape, feel the shape, think as much as you can about the shape, given the knowledge base that you have, which is how to see values, how to organize and unify values, how to render based on edges. Those are things that you do possess. Use them to the extent that you can. And then obviously, equipping yourself with anatomical knowledge and studies to know what all those bumps are. It makes you more versatile and more able to sort of tackle things faster, tackle things with a different interpretive edge. There's a lot of things that it allows you to do. All right,
hmm
that's my big spiel.
Yeah, that makes a
Mm,
lot of sense, I'd say.
mm. They say about life, you can kind of be optimistic and be surprised when things go bad, or you can be pessimistic and surprised when things go good. Most of your life isn't things happening. So the perspective that you take is most of what you live rather than your reaction to events. So if
hmm
you're pessimistic, that means you're pessimistic all the time, waiting for a surprise that's good. Whereas maybe being optimistic all the time, you probably have like a happier life, despite potentially being unprepared for unprepared for negative occurrences because you think things are going to work out. I still think you're like net better life being surprised when things are bad, right? Um,
Yeah.
just one person's opinion, but I think it's like that with like advice and education as well. Like if the premise that I go into it with is, this teacher is going to give me advice that has merit in it. I just need to figure out what the merit is. I'm always going to get more than the person who goes into it thinking most of this is probably bullshit, and I need to extract only the good bits. You know what I mean? Because I mean,
Yeah.
I lived that. I could say that as a foolish young student. I kind of had the idea that a lot of my teachers are just talking. I could have had an alternate perspective that was they're good at something. I want as much of the good as I can get, and yeah, sure, I can sift out the bad bits. One of the low key things that does bother me though is not as much a technical thing, but kind of an artistic thing. Like the cropping here seems to me to not contain the wisdom and consideration that a silhouette like this might have garnered in your drawing process. That you draw even a single silhouette with that much coolness, yet you crop a drawing with that little consideration. I don't like it. Every drawing is an aesthetic experience. Even if you want it not to be, you're by default you are taking part in an aesthetic experience by drawing at all. So the delta in between energy and output and focus on considering the aesthetic angle and not doing so is so minimal as to be meaningless in terms of leaving one out or not. That was a very wordy way to say if you're drawing, like decide on a crop, make a shape, consider a shape. You're already doing that everywhere else anyway. It won't cost you anything extra to do it also in this instance. Make
hmm
sense?
Yeah.
And that like doing that will ultimately benefit you forever because you're practicing something that necessarily will be a part of what you do. Like all of the other drawings that you'd ever do will have that component. In addition, like considering like what edges, what silhouettes are potent, powerful, useful that you want to focus on, whichever. What edge quality to use and what in what place. I mean, so much of that is what I consider my job nowadays. Like the thing that I offer as an artist is just this, pretty much. Uh, my reflections and taste on how I kind of arrange things in on a piece of paper. It's not profoundly more complicated than that.
Hmm.
Which is actually I find to be a relief. Early conversations I had about composition, or early conversations about composition that I was privy to at the academy were so like convoluted and like based on, but they were so based around these ideas of like you needed to study everything about the old masters in order to understand anything about composition. It's totally untrue. I think those things are supplemental and like helpful and great. And studying the old masters, who doesn't love that? But the baseline point is like if you go into a museum and you see something that you think is cool, you have acknowledged a de facto aesthetic sensibility. There's some things that you like the way that they look. There's some things that you don't like the way that they look. Your job is to make your drawings contain the things that you like the way they look. That's composition, like in its most basic and like essential form. The rest is elaboration, right? Like just like in drawing, our job is to more or less make a drawing that is a picture of this model. Everything else after that, anatomy, keying, value interpretation, edges, depth, perspective. All these things are like other things that we use to embellish and make deeper our drawing experience. I think that this is the same in composition. It starts with the fact that there are things you like, running towards those and embellishing them using lots of different, potentially complex and deep techniques. That's great, but that's not the price of entry. That's like what you learn further down the road as you gain experience. So I've changed this into what I think is a slightly more aesthetic arrangement. Partly because I feel like right now a lot of my attention is drawn completely away from the focal areas of the drawing and into basically the outline of her chest versus her dress. That's right where all of my attention goes. With this configuration, and let's add to that also like the kind of clearer value statements in the eye, for example. I feel like a lot of my attention is thrust upwards into the model's face. That's what I would like to happen. I wonder actually, Julian,
Hmm.
do you do you get a sense of that when you look at this? I'm just going to combine all these together into one layer. When you see this, do you register where your attention is going?
Yeah, if you ask me to, or if I'm consciously thinking about it, yes, I do think about where my attention is going.
And then you get a sense when this is changed. Now I'm saying this because to me, I know effectively that my attention has completely changed to another area of this. Like, do you get a sense of that divergence, or do you feel like it's like at the moment, like it's not quite like a thing that your eye kind of picks up?
I have to be honest and say I don't think it's as extreme or as
Hmm.
significant as what maybe you're experiencing.
Okay. No, no. I mean, this is cool. This is really just kind of in a way like a survey. Like I'm just very curious because, like, I know that I have this sensitivity. Like, I know that when I look at this, I mean, I could tell you that my eyes first go here. They travel to this. This is a massive edge that kind of draws my attention. Like, I feel like a lot of my attention goes like all into these spaces. Like, even this is kind of a major area that's kind of drawing my attention. So all the things that I'm trying to do, when I like the first adjustments that I want to make are to like mitigate those because I know that those aren't the point. Like I know
Mhm.
that there's a less than 0% chance that those are what you wanted the viewer to go to. But that's exactly where my eyes go is to like all those places. And if I look at it further, my eye is actually still down here because of the value that I've allowed to sit there being actually probably the darkest dark. I mean, I made that. I kind of elaborated on the value that was already there and allowed that to stay very dark. I would lighten that kind of considerably it's fine to have it as a shape, but I wouldn't want it to be like one of the darkest shapes that I used.
Mhm.
I would want to preserve the use of those darks for areas that I thought were very significant, like very significant.
Yeah, as a I don't know why it feels weird to call myself as an artist, but as an artist,
I still feel
um,
weird about it. Don't worry. Like
okay,
when I have to say it. Yeah, go on.
okay. As an artist, didn't feel like I was allowed to not bring that value. I guess high is a weird way to go down.
Mm,
Let's say,
mm,
like, I
mhm.
see it in the reference. It's a black shirt. It's black,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
make it dark.
Hmm.
It's like a reflex, or just how my brain wants to go about it. Like, it's black shirt,
Hmm.
go dark. That's the darkest point.
Hmm.
I've been now allowing myself some freedom with, like, I remember I was so proud of myself because when I was working on this drawing, I was like, there's a dark portion on the model's left part,
Hmm.
like where the hair is. And I thought to myself, well, I don't need to go super dark there because it might contrast, or it might pull attention away from the model's right, where most of the dark is.
Hmm.
And that might be a really small thing. And maybe you'll disagree that maybe it should go darker, or I should bring it up even more. But being able to catching myself making that decision was like a cool thing for me. I was like, oh wow,
Hmm.
I think my sensibility as an artist is growing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, completely. Like that's the I think that's like kind of the essence of it. There's this idea that like I remember hearing about this long before, so long before. But you've heard the phrase artistic license,
Hmm.
right? I think when I was in college and I first started hearing that, it was like a catch-all for like just doing whatever you wanted. It was just a thing that kind of explained away anything that you kind of felt to do. But I don't think that's what it is at all. Like I think artistic license, when you really consider it and what I imagine it must have been at its inception, was the capacity to make like informed choices that made the picture better than what the source was. I mean, it's a means to push back against sort of capricious indifference of nature. It can be black in the wrong place. Does that mean that the artwork has to be black in the wrong place too? Do you see
Hmm.
what I mean? But
Yeah.
you need a mechanism that allows you to push back against that because the existence of nature is such a strong force. The existence of the source image being such is such a strong force. And if you're not equipped with a valid argument in the alternative, you will simply go with whatever you see because that's the path of least resistance, right?
Hmm.
But that you feel something like that in a moment growing that you think, this aligns more with what I think the vision of this drawing is. Wow, yes, that's a moment. Pause, take that in, and be happy that that's like a seed that's kind of growing because just like the aesthetic sensibilities I'm saying about cropping this, that will get like kind of stronger and stronger. And it doesn't mean, necessarily like wholesale changes to everything. It just means that you're equipped with the ability to act on a consideration or an impulse that is informed by obviously your understanding the fundamentals, and you understand what values are and how values guide attention and how they affect form. Because there's something that will push back in the other direction. There are things that you'll want to do that fundamentally like undermine the functioning of a picture. Like let's say that you think, for example, well, all this stuff about like this dark value over here, I think it needs to be like the inverse. Like I think it needs to be like lighter than the other stuff, right? It needs to be like the white of the paper almost. But I think it does fundamentally also like diminish the picture. I think that is like a bridge too far. Like I don't think it improves anything. I think it kind of takes away. But kind of knowing where that boundary is something you find through practice. Also, by the way, to the value application in this, any value application that you make should increase the sense of form. Now, while this is not a mandate, it's a good way to sort of measure the acuity of your process and understanding. If you're adding value that does not contribute significantly to a sense of deeper form, you might consider that maybe you're adding values in a less than useful way. There's a few places where I see that occurring where you've added value, but not necessarily added form. And that would be, there's kind of like several of them. So I think it's kind of symptomatic of something that's really worth kind of talking about. But when we look at so like passages that are, it's a very filmmakery term, maybe it's a very authory term as well, but like liminal spaces, right?
Ah.
Transitions in between things. Whenever I talk about like transitional spaces, it always comes to mind because of how wanky I think that word is. Like nobody uses the word liminal
Mhm.
it casually. Like
Yeah.
it's always still like sounds so like deep, like oh, liminal space. Like what are we talking about? Anyway, sorry, but these transitional spaces, like in between, certainly between light and shadow, but generally like taking place across the edges of planes. There's several of them that like don't, I guess, like seal the deal is what I'm thinking. Like they act like values and they kind of look like values, but they don't create form the way that values should. So like at the outside corner of the mouth, I think is one that to me like looks very, very flat. And it's not that you haven't applied value, it's that you haven't like created a gradient out from that dark that actually creates the illusion of form, right? Like it needs that transition to become something. And if it doesn't have it, well, anyway, the drawing will stay flat. It will stay abstract. And I think that will eventually be like quite distracting.
Hmm.
So when you are adding those values, I think I'm taking into account the requirement, the necessity that it needs to, and especially it's funny because it's happening like along like all the edges where things should turn. It seems like the value that you've applied like doesn't quite get that transit. You know what it reminds me of? It's actually like when people are painting and they don't make like enough of a transitional value. Like they'll paint the shadow here and then they'll paint the light here. But what they won't do is like make a transition in between the two. They won't like take their brush and like make a little bit of like a blend in between the two. Like that's what needed to happen. That's the transition.
Hmm.
And like it's like that little thing that's kind of missing. So you have these all these what I call kind of broken transitions. Like it gets lighter at the edge so the form doesn't turn. Like I mean, just on a baseline level, like looking at what impression that gives the light shape, like it makes the rest of it round.
Right. There's definitely other places to do that as well.
Yeah. And it's kind of one of those things that is, which I think are very like valuable and important. There's almost like drawing habits. I think this is not a failure of observation exactly. It's like I've used the F word now. I mean, a failure, but it sounds so dramatic. But Julian, you understand what I mean. We've been working together for a while. I don't need to
Mm-hmm.
couch this in too many terms of safety, but it's a failure of habit, meaning like this particular habit was not inculcated or has not yet been inculcated. Like you didn't check this particular effect. Had you would have done it everywhere it needed to be done. Like it's almost like sort of unity of shadows. Like once somebody gets into the habit of that, like it kind of never doesn't happen again.
Hmm.
Only because it's like a rote thing. Like it's a thing that once you know it, you just do it. Whereas there's other things like, oh, the length of the nose, like this is not rote. This needs to be checked every time, all the time, or you'll fuck it up. Like that's the way drawing works. If you don't check proportions, they go wonky. Like there's no way to like set that and forget that. Whereas stuff like this is a little bit like set it and forget it.
Yeah, I think you can even translate that into a habit because I think I've seen you probably check proportions much more often than the average person drawing, or at least the
Mm.
average beginner, you know.
Mm.
So, you've made it a habit to keep your proportions tight all
Mm.
throughout.
Yeah, this is a fair point. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that might separate like novices from intermediates and on, you know.
And bear in mind too, while doing this, that it's the little changes to the edges of those things that I think show the validity of the other parts of that process, if that makes sense. Like, I think that so many of the values that you have put into this are fundamentally very good and really well observed. This kind of validates them through performance. Adding this little bit to the edge of it shows how good the other observations are, if that makes sense.
I think that makes sense.
Cool. Were there significant things that you felt in this one?
I think that I made similar mistakes on this one than in with the other one. This was actually the one before the drawing right before
Mhm,
the other one. So
mhm,
when I look at when I look at this thing now, I see I don't like the crop anymore. Well, not that I liked it in the beginning, but I just thought I didn't really put much thought into it, and I think this can definitely be improved based on what you said about being more conscious about the crop.
mm,
I think the eye is having the same problem where it's bitty,
mhm.
as you said.
It sounds, the thing I like about it is it sounds so terrible. Like
No,
I say it to myself about my own drawings. Oh, it's so bitty right now. I need to like,
oh no
it
no
motivates me to like, yeah, to get into it.
no
Go
no,
on.
it's good, and I think I can probably apply what you just said about the transitional um, spaces here. I think those are probably going to be the highest payoffs. I think in the last meeting you said you like to think about if you did one thing, what would be the
Mm.
highest payoff? Those are already three things that are probably going to be big payoffs.
Yeah, as soon as I get integrated. Yeah. Couple quick things about this one that
Sure.
could be cool to talk about. There are like the nose in itself like probably deserves like its own just kind of lecture
Mm.
about the things, the do's and don'ts of like drawing nose. God, that's such a YouTube video.
Yeah, YouTube.
But things to do with noses that almost always work. And it's also there's a corresponding axis here to like things that noses look like, especially in source photographs, that are confounding to what should work.
Mm.
You've drawn that nose very much for a reason, in that it looks like that. But what would be better, and actually ironically make it look more like a nose, is if the gradient that emanated from the actual nostril itself acted more like an ambient occlusion. That the top edge of the nose was a hard edge, and that there was a gradient emanating out from that bottom edge of the nose. 10 times out of 10, this gives the nose a greater sense of depth. And it validates other things like when you're adding in, say, some of the reflected light on the nostril, that now kind of projects out as a form from the face. Before that, it does a lot less so. Now, as with any mechanism that you're implementing, let's say slightly artificially. I say slightly because there's a rhetorical argument I could make looking at that source image that all the things that I'm telling you right now are there. They are just themes that are embedded a little bit more deeply and are more difficult to see if you're not looking for them.
Mm.
But suffice to say, like, as with any theme that is implemented with force, seemingly artificially, you can overdo it and it can look kind of bad because of that. So you do need like a backstop to like double check, hey, does this kind of work? More often than not, though, I find I get more out of it when I do this than not. And the only thing required for that is just a judgment backstop to say, did I do too much? Did I go too far? Like even to the extent where I feel like it almost looks more like the source image, despite being not exactly more like the source image in a weird way. Yeah.
Right.
So just bear that in mind the next time you're banging around on a nose. All right. Julian, always a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm going to run to the next meeting. I'll see
Okay.
you.
See ya. Take
Cheers.
care.